Don't ever be afraid of a scale run that leads into something maybe a little more flavorful. All right, how can we learn to lay down great sounding guitar solos over our favorite songs so we can add a piece of ourselves and get more connected to our favorite music, and of course just have a little freaking fun? Who doesn't love hearing great guitar songs if you play this instrument and say to yourself, oh, could I do something like that? Could I change things up a little bit? We've probably all done it. It's a guitar fantasy. Anyways, today we're gonna mess around with the song Lenny by Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's a 2-chorder, right? Just 2 chords, but there's a lot of interesting stuff we can do. And this is something I love to do with one-to-one students. I made a video recently about a different song. There are different textures and different vibes and different energies in every single song. So taking a look at them, reminding ourselves what we can do, exploring those themes in a non-judgmental setting, experimenting can be so powerful for when we do get into, jam scenarios where there's maybe a little bit more pressure, and you can all of a sudden have these ideas and approaches that you can say, okay, here's what's going on in this progression, here's the approaches I can take, and all of a sudden you can, get some nice sounding guitar solos. So anyways, if you're curious about that and getting better at soloing and improvising and having a good approach to that concept, then grab your guitar and let's jump in. So Lenny, it is 2 chords. Like I said, we've got an E major 13, right? With that kind of bass note, E major 13 with an A6, right? Those are our 2 chords, back and forth and back and forth. That E major 13, if you're like, well, wait a second, that's a bit of a reach for me right now. I don't know if I can mess around with that. How can I lay down my own loop with these 2 chords? Well, you have a few options. First of all, I'm in standard tuning, okay? Stevie Ray Vaughan plays a half step, tuned down half a step, okay? I'm in standard tuning. I just wanted to make something that was more accessible to more people. If you just have one guitar, most likely it's in standard tuning. I've got, my tuned down half a step guitar, which everyone makes fun of me for and thinks it's so nasty. It's my high school guitar. Anyways, I think it sounds great, but I have one of those. If you don't have one of those, standard tuning is more approachable, so that's what we're doing. If you don't think you can lay down a loop, all right, in the description, I have a download. It's a Google Drive link. It is a 10-minute loop of those 2 chords. It's a little janky sounding. I didn't spend a ton of time creating it. I just literally put down the 2 chords and then looped it on Logic and put it out there. So I'm sorry if it doesn't sound great, but you'll at least have a 10-minute loop of just these 2 chords to experiment with. Now, I will also link in the description, and I'll even put it up here, right here, click this link. That is the Lenny backing track in standard tuning. I will also, as that one goes away, I will put the backing track tuned down half a step, the true Lenny tuning. I'll put all these in the description so you can have a place to go where it's easier to see. The layout is more simple. But anyways, you have all these options, okay? Now, the true Lenny backing track goes into a different section that goes beyond the, E major 13 and the A6. It's a series of 6 chords. Anyways, all of the rules that we're going to go over apply to that little, let's call it a B section. All right. But if you know the song, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know the song, check it out. I appreciate you watching, even if you don't know the song. But with that, let's jump into the concepts we're going to go over, and then you'll see how we apply them to creating our own solos, right? So what we want to do is figure out, basically what patterns, shapes, arpeggios, things like that we can use over these chords. Okay, and now to kind of keep things in the SRV realm, we're going to basically go over some scales. So we can use 2 pentatonic options, all right? And he does this throughout the song, is he plays the E minor pentatonic, and he also plays the E major pentatonic, okay? Now we can also use the E major scale as well, but we'll go over that in a second. So using this as a framework, right? Here would be like the root, right, for E minor. Okay, but here would also be the root for E major. But if you don't know that little trick of using your index finger to start that pentatonic shape, here it is. I move to the pinky, and now my index finger's on the 9th fret. My pinky is the lead for that major scale shape. Right, that would be if it was minor, but ending here. Right, so different flavor, but they work if you just boil things down to like E major and A major. And kind of put it in like a simple bluesy, you know, context. You could mess around with the minor pentatonic. You could also mess around with the major pentatonic, right? So that's just boiling things down to really, you know, simple elements, taking away the, you know, major 13th, taking away the 6th, right? E major, A major, but using those frameworks, you know, we can still recognize. Also, that's like my day of the word, the week frame. We have all these frameworks we can use inside of guitar playing, but using that concept, we can recognize we can do the same thing with this progression. Minor pentatonic, major pentatonic. Now there's going to be moments where you might decide, I like the major. Stick with that, right? If you're improvising and you want to inject your own flavor into the song, stick with that. If you like the minor, well, I'll stick with that, right? And of course you can blend the two. Okay, and I will say in the description as well, if you know my stuff, you know I like to give free PDFs. I just want you to be good guitar players. There is a free download. I am going to give you a map of the neck in E major as well as E minor. Okay, all of the pentatonic shapes. So 5 shapes for each key. I will give you individual shapes, and then I will give you the map connected, right? So if this would be shape 1, like our anchor shape, right? Then we would have a shape 2, so on and so forth for 5 shapes. Now, if you haven't seen my video on mapping the neck using the pentatonic scale, I'm linking it up here. It's a really valuable tool and skill to have. And yeah, that'll be the deal. But you will still have all 5 shapes in this PDF as well. And that's basically the deal. I'm going to put on the backing track in just a second, but you know, it's also up to you to just bring in your own licks and your own flavor. So there it is in minor. There it is in major, right? A similar kind of lick or phrase. The kind of next little thing, the final thing that you can do is you can play the E major, just traditional scale. So pentatonic, right? 5 notes. Major scale, 7 notes. Okay? So you can also bring in elements of the traditional major scale. And we can again. Right? We can just think about it with the basic E and A chords. But you can bring in flavors, those E major scale flavors, okay? If you'd like to. It's up to you to decide what your approach is. Now, a non-Stevie Ray Vaughan approach that you can play with is, you know, E major and A major arpeggios throughout this backing track. That's going to be like a bonus for yourself. You know, if you don't know your arpeggios, look up arpeggios, you know, look up E major arpeggios if you want to. You can just probably go on like Google Images and look those up and play with them. But for now, we're going to keep things with scales. So E minor pentatonic, E major pentatonic, and the E major scale, the classic E major scale. And we have to figure out how to blend those or use them separately to sound good over this backing track. Now, like I said, the one I created is a bit janky. It does not sound like his backing track. But such is the case with, you know, when we want to play, you know, over our own stuff, keep it simple, you know, make it quick, So that's what I did here, and I'll talk you through these approaches, because like I said, I only went over the scales, but it's the how you use them and how you want to think about them that becomes important. So I'm going to turn on the backing track and we'll get into it. Hey everyone, just a quick reminder that if you are enjoying this video, you are finding the concepts in this lesson to be helpful to you and your playing, to make sure and click the like button, actually get down there and click the like button and subscribe to the channel. I've got lots of good stuff on this channel already, and we'll have lots of good stuff coming out soon enough, but liking and subscribing is very helpful for me and the channel. It pushes, things out to more people and will benefit me and my ability to make more videos for you all in the future. So again, if you are liking it, you want to see more things like this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and now back to the lesson. So here's the backing track. There's the E major 13, there's the A6. So we can start with either one of these flavors. So let's start with the E major pentatonic. There's the E minor, right? You can hear the switch. There's E major. So you can just play around with those two, little phrases, that little tiny box, 9 and 11 on the D and G string. And then 12 to 14 on the D and G strings. Okay, now let's just check out the E major scale. Right, so just those little extra notes. Don't ever be afraid of a scale run that leads into something maybe a little more flavorful. All right, what you want to do also, right, and we're keeping it pretty simple. You can play around with the entire neck, okay? Those shapes just right there are powerful. I said this on the last kind of how to jam, how to solo video. Those shapes are powerful. You can take those other shapes and, kind of play with those as well. There's bringing in some arpeggio work, all right? But connecting these is the interesting skill of the song, and how you can express yourself, kind of injecting some of the Stevie Ray Vaughan flavor, but a little bit of your own if you want to go between the flavors, right? So you can take each one individually and just say, I'm minor, I'm going minor. Right? Or you can say, I'm just major. Right? Or you can do a little bit of both. And that's where you want to select or recognize the notes that are overlapping. So obviously 12 on the high E, 12 on the low E are going to overlap, right? Those are both E notes. So obviously they're in the E minor and the E major. Right now, if you kind of look at your, shape 5 for the E minor pentatonic, right, you'll see 9 on the D string, 9 on the G string. All right, now if you think about major scale, Okay, you have this 10 on the B string. That's part of the E minor pentatonic as well. Okay, so you've got those notes. All right, E major scale as well. No, I was about to go into the wrong note. Right here. Okay, 14th fret on the G string, but that's the same note as 12th fret on the A string, excuse me, brain farts. And take your time if you want to experiment with connecting those a little bit more elegantly. Right, this also, 14 on the D string works. And that's part of the blues scale, 13 on the G string, so. And he'll go into the blues scale as well, but those are maybe some additional flavors to think about. Let me turn off the backing track and we'll kind of close this up. All right, so obviously using those 3 scales as the constructs that we will live in as we try to improvise ourselves, you can get a lot done, especially if you open up the neck, you tell yourself, I'm just gonna slide, for a few bars. So I'm just gonna do sliding licks. Then you say, okay, I'm just gonna do bending licks. So then I'll stay back in the pentatonic shapes. I'm just gonna use G, B, and high E between 9 and 15, right? There's all these great ways to kind of confine yourself to smaller spaces, which can be really helpful. Again, I talked about that on the other video. Again, I'll link it here. I'll link in the description as well. So you got lots of links in the description. You might have to click more in there, but there's a lot to play with just using those. But like I said, there's a few ways you can go beyond what I showed you. So the E minor or the blues scale in E, you can play with those elements. Like I said, you can also learn the Stevie Ray Vaughan solo so that you can see how he navigates it. But if you want to bring in your own creativity, think about them in that larger framework so you don't have to feel boxed into his specific licks, if that makes sense. You can also play with arpeggios, E major and A major arpeggios. So again, once you think about things, as those large concepts, okay, E major pentatonic, E major scale, E minor pentatonic, well, that opens up the entire fretboard right there. And then on top of that, okay, if you want to take things further and you want to experiment with the E major, arpeggios and the A major arpeggios, all of a sudden you have like a gazillion more things to play with. And then on top of that, if you bring in the E blues scale. So I want to keep things to, as far as what I'm discussing and what I'm giving you access to on the PDF, maybe because I'm somewhat lazy, E major pentatonic, E major scale, E minor pentatonic. Those 3 things will be mapped out in the PDF. So definitely download that. That's super, super helpful. And that is the deal. I'll leave it there. I could rant and ramble about this forever, but let me know if you have questions, throw those into the comments. And of course, if you have any songs that you're like, oh, I would like this breakdown. I want to know how I could play arpeggios over such and such song. How can I play arpeggios exclusively over Sublime or something if that's something you're interested in, for example. Then leave that in the comments. And yeah, have fun noodling around. Like I said, the backing track, the kind of sloppy backing track is in the description as well. And of course, as I already said, if you enjoyed this lesson, you enjoyed this approach in this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. Lots of good stuff on here already and lots of good stuff coming up. So thank you for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you all in the next one. Peace.